I don't know what physiologically changed, but I don't fall the same way. He's in a cold dungeon, so they send him to Patmos, right? We know that. Patmos was a small, rocky, and barren area where many criminals of Rome were sent. So the worst criminals of Rome. So he's not around pleasant people, right? Not, I don't know, what would pleasant people be? He's not living with the Olivatos. He is with horrible, horrible criminals. Very harsh conditions, and there was mines that the criminals had to work. Could you imagine if it were me? I'd be like, Jesus, I'm your best friend. I'm old. I'm sore. I don't feel good. I got arthritis. Why am I on Patmos? But he overcomes that, right? And what does he do? What does he produce in Patmos? Gang. No. He produces the book of Revelation. Pretty good book, eh? Right? Now this guy. I think if I was a Bible character, I would be Peter. So he's one of the top 12, right? He's on the team. He gets out of the boat, walks on water, and then what does he do?
Takes his eyes off. Jesus.
He panics. I would hope, if I'm walking on water, I would be like, right on. Praise you, Jesus, let's go. But he's like, panicked, and he sinks. You would think he'd be so embarrassed and just be like, I'm out. I can't be on the team, right? Then he cuts off a soldier's ear, right, in the garden. And Jesus dogs him out over it. You think, oh, brother. Then what does he do? The night that Jesus is captured, what does he do, Joe? He denies him. So he's on the team. He's walked on water, and he denies him. If that was me, I'd be like, I'm out. I just can't do it. And then later on, he gets rebuked by Paul, right, for making the Gentiles follow the Jewish laws. So this is a guy that just stumbles over and over and over. But he's done a couple of good things, right? Even afterwards, the church was built on him, and, you know, just rather significant things. And here is our biblical punching bag. Talking about, dude, give it up. In 2 Corinthians 11, 23 to 28, Paul writes, I've worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews, his people, not the evil ISIS or something, his people. Maybe we can reenact it here, our life skills group here. Maybe we just pick out one of you and we'll flog you. His people flogged him with 40 lashes minus 1, 5 times. I would think about after the second, probably after the first, but after the second, I'd be like, God, seriously. He gets flogged 5 times. 3 times he's beaten with rods. Once pelted with stones. 3 times shipwrecked. Give up, dude. Man, stop. He's a punching bag.
Stay home.
Stay home. Go back to bed. Constantly in danger from fellow Jews, danger from Gentiles. It just goes on and on, right? How about this character? Talking about hard luck. He is conceived to an unwed 14-year-old. Born in a barn. Has to go on the run. His people reject him. The leaders call him names. Lie about him. He's ultimately killed in the worst possible way. And he did a couple of good things. right? Um, so what we're going to do today, we're going to review a book by John Maxwell. Have you heard of John Maxwell? He's getting older now. He's a prolific writer. He has a doctorate. He led a mega church in San Diego, went on to form a consulting, writing company called Enjoy. Famous man. He writes this book, Failing Forward, and this is what we're going to go through this evening. I'm going to encourage you, pick it up on Amazon. It's real cheap because you, like all those other great failures, are going to stumble over and over. Let me give you some interesting stats on this Failing Forward. It was published in 2000. Today, so there is about 3 million books on Amazon. Here's a little inside info. When you look up a book on Amazon, it'll say the sales rank. So that is what of the number sold. Is it a number 1 book, number 2, number 3? There's about 3 million books on Amazon. Today, written 2000, before some of you were born. Old. This is old. It is the 11,000th best book, which is a big number, but compared to 3 million, it is still a top seller. In Christian books for Christian living, business, and professional growth, it is ranked number 24. It's the 24th best-selling book in that category today. I pulled this week, this information. Secular books, business and money, job hunting and careers guides, how they break it up into categories. It's number 84. So it's still a big seller because it gives us some important things. And remember, there's only like 4 failure books out there, right? Slight exaggeration, but there are not many. Another good book I'll just mention. I'm not going to bring it up here, but if you ever get a chance, take a look at Tim Tebow's book, Shaken. That's a great book. Talking about a guy going through a trial, right? His whole life to get to the NFL. And when he peters out in 3 years or something. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down by chapter. And I'm going to talk about the highlights from the different chapters. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get a new definition of failure and success. People often think failure is avoidable. It's not, right? Wasn't it James that told us guaranteed and plural? Rules. You will learn lessons. There are no mistakes, only lessons. One of the sayings I really like is sometimes you win and sometimes you it's actually learn. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. Rule 3, a lesson is repeated until it's learned. So, what's often our prayer, Mike? Teach me quick, Lord, so we can move on. Yeah. If you don't learn the easy lessons, they get harder. Have we ever seen that in anyone's lives? Where the lessons keep getting harder and harder? Someone we know, we saw something on Facebook this morning, and it would seem to indicate that they're saying they just got out of jail. And this is a person that's had many lessons over the years, and they keep getting harder.
From a young teenager on.
You'll know you've learned a lesson when your actions change. Next, failure is not an event. No one can conclude that a failure happened. You have to look at things holistically. It's not an event. Life is a journey. In 1985, people would say Steve Jobs was a failure, that he had a failure event. But it was actually a journey to take us to the iPod, right? Next, people think failure is objective. What's the difference between objective and subjective? Do you guys know? So subjective means it's subject to people's opinion. Subjective is different people can look at something and have different opinions. Objective is, 2 + 2 is always 4. There's nothing subjective about that. So people think failure is objective. It's not. The answer is that you are the only person that can really label what you do as a failure. People think failure is an enemy. It's not. Edison, I found 10,000 ways not to do things, right? Failure is not irreversible. We've seen that. Poor Abe, right? Man, he just took it on the forehead with a 2x4 over and over, didn't he? The average entrepreneur fails 3.8 times before they succeed. Failure is not a stigma, and failure is not final. It's all how we look at it. Now, forgive me, I'm going to read 3 passages tonight out of this book. I'm not the best reader out loud. I read great. I just don't read out loud very well. If I could summarize this stuff, I would, but these pages have some really good stories. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Truett Cathy. Who is that?
Chick-fil-A guy.
Chick-fil-A, right? The founder of Chick-fil-A. Does anybody here work at Chick-fil-A?
Does anyone?
Abby? Anybody else? No? They're kind of like the godfather of Castle Rock. So let me tell you Truett's story. Do you know what it is, Abby?
I did at one point, but I do
Okay.
not remember.
Truett's description of his childhood activities showed me that he was a born entrepreneur. As a second grader, he discovered that he could buy a 6-pack of Coke for, like $1, and then sell it, each can individually, right? Make a lot of money. Like many young men of the era, Truett went into the Army. When he was discharged in 1945, right, World War II, he was ready to pursue opportunity. What appealed to him was a restaurant, and his dream was to work with Ben, one of his brothers. After learning a little about the business, they scraped together some money, located a site, built a restaurant, and opened it as Dwarf Grill, later the Dwarf House, in Hateville, Georgia, on the south side of Atlanta. It was open 24 hours, 6 days a week, and though it required an incredible amount of work, it was profitable from the first week. But it wouldn't be long before Truett faced the first of several major setbacks. The first came early. Only 3 years after opening the restaurant, Truett's 2 brothers were in a small private plane that crashed on the way to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Both of them died. Losing a business partner is tough. Losing both brothers was horrible. Truett was devastated. Once he got over the emotional shock, he went on alone. A year later, he paid Eunice, his brother Ben's widow, for her share of the business. A year after that, he opened a second restaurant. By then, things are going well. Then one night, he was awakened by a phone call. There was a fire at his second restaurant location. He dashed off to see what had been done, but when he arrived, he discovered that the fire had totally destroyed the operation. That alone was bad enough. Worse was the fact that he had practically no insurance. Within but a few weeks, Truett faced another debilitating setback. He discovered that he had polyps in his colon that would have to be removed. The timing couldn't have been worse. So he opens up 2 restaurants, loses his business partner, loses a restaurant, and then he has polyps, which is cancer, right? One operation turned into 2, and much to his dismay, he was out of action for several months. An eternity for an energetic businessman like him. What does an active entrepreneur do when he's stuck in bed for months at a time? If he's Truett Cathy, he comes up with $1 million idea. The time Truett's been out of commission inspired him to play with a new concept. He had always loved chicken, and it had been an important part of Dwarf's house fare. For a while, the restaurant had offered a boneless chicken breast on the menu. What would happen, he wondered, if I took that chicken breast, seasoned it and fried it just right, and put it on a bun with the right condiments? The answer became the Chick-fil-A sandwich, and the start of one of the largest privately owned restaurant chains in the world. Today, Truett Cathy is credited with inventing the chicken sandwich in the fast food industry. Chick-fil-A operates more than 900 restaurants across the country and has 200,000 square foot headquarters that sits on 73 acres and just south of Atlanta. In the year 2000, it became $1 billion company. It is one of the most successful operations in the restaurant world. Blah, 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 we know, right? They're the Godfather. Thomas Edison believed many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. If you can change the way you see failure and gain the strength to keep running the race, get a new definition of failure, regard it as the price you pay for progress. If you can do that, you will put yourself in a much better position to fail.